Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Sri Damodara Janani, Sri Damodara's Mother, written by His Holiness Sivarama Swami. At the moment, we are reading from chapter 8, Sri Damodara's Mother. And let's begin. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripa tam ham vante Shri Gurum Deenatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. Another boy added, if your mother became upset at your hiding a pot of yogurt, imagine how upset she will be if you conceal this mortar in some far-off place. The cowherd boys laughed heartily at their childish jokes and so prompted Krishna to abandon his philosophical abstractions. While yogis meditated in secluded mountain caves to catch a glimpse of Paramatma within their hearts, these village gopas could see, touch and play with Bhagwan at will. The difference between the two was that the yogis tried to subdue the all-powerful Lord by the strength of their austerities, while the gopas only thought of how to serve Krishna with hearts full of love. Krishna had appeared in this world to make known the superiority of the cowherd boys' approach to perfection. Thus, aspiring spiritualists who acquired even a little of the Vrajavasis' attachment to him could attain a liberation that eluded others even after eons of ascetic discipline. When Brahma had offered a boon to Drona and Dhara, the Vasus replied, Bhakti syat parama loke yayanjo durgatim taret. Let those who follow in the devotional footsteps of the Lord's associates, the Vrajavasis, be easily delivered from the miserable condition of materialistic life. What did following in the footsteps of the Vrajavasis mean? Krishna's pastimes are so wonderful that if one hears or repeats them, the devotional mood of the Vrajavasis rubs off on the hearers' and chanters' hearts. As a consequence, both faith in and attachment to the service of the Vrajavasis impels practitioners to adopt the process of Bhakti Yoga in order to qualify themselves for the perfection of becoming an associate of the Lord. Then, by the strength of devotional service, practitioners advance from the stages of practice to ecstasy and from ecstasy to love. When love blossoms, a devotee becomes a qualified follower of the Vrajavasis in one of the four mellows of devotion and is instated in a corresponding service under the guidance of a specific Gopa or Gopi. Thus one becomes an eternal associate of Krishna and enters into those pastimes which earlier one had heard about. Considering the eminence of an attainment that makes one eligible to play with God, the devotional path that leads to and includes following a Vrajavasi role model is actually a relatively easy one. The abiding principle is to always be in the shelter of pure devotees who have given their hearts over to the son of Mother Yashoda. Surrendered devotees can engage in the service of Mother Yashoda's son and enjoy the happiness of his sports even while residing within this world. Such privilege reflects the measure of freedom that surrender to Krishna's associates brings. By contrast, liberated souls and even devotees of the Lord who do not recognize the original feature of Bhagavan as the son of Mother Yashoda have great difficulty in attaining him. Thus, the root of loving devotion is the mercy of Krishna's associates, and among those associates, Mother Yashoda stands supreme, as testified to by the names Bhagwan and Gopika Sutta being synonymous. At the thought of being called Gopika Sutta, Krishna smiled. It is one of my favorite names, like Yashamati Nandan. But Gopika Sutta implies that I am also the son of the elder gopis of Gokul. And that is the truth. My mother's association, they too acquired a love for me similar to hers. The Gopas and Gopis of Gokul used to think Will we ever be as fortunate as Nanda and Yashoda? Will Krishna ever become our son? To fulfill this desire, Krishna devised a plan to become the Vrajavasi's children in the future. When Brahma would decide to test Krishna's powers by stealing the cowherd boys and calves, unknown even to Balaram, Krishna would expand himself to assume the forms of both gopas and calves. In that way, Yashoda's followers would enjoy the special pleasure of breastfeeding, massaging, bathing, dressing, and feeding Krishna. And although these gopis' affection for Krishna had been greater than that for their own sons, when Krishna would become their son, that distinction would disappear, and every day they would find new inspiration to love their sons as much as they loved Krishna. Thus, Krishna would reward the residents of Vrindavan for their exceptional love, a love they had acquired by keeping company with the touchstone monarchs of their land. By being always in their company and by hearing from them about baby Krishna, parental love spontaneously awoke in their hearts of Nanda and Yashoda's contemporaries. The same dynamic works for those who have taken to the practice of devotional service and have the good fortune of serving exalted Vaishnavas. The process of awakening spontaneous devotion is eternal and effective in all phases of time and in every place. The Gandharva named Chandrakanti, the personified Vedas, and the sages of Dandakaranya forest are some examples. Similarly, Raghunath Das Goswami and Shyamananda Prabhu came to the stage of spontaneous devotion by the guidance of Rupa Goswami and Jiva Goswami, respectively. While his friends were arguing over some delicacy, Krishna shook his head at the foolish people who believed his mother earned her status by practice. People in the world do not switch mothers. Why would a wise man think that I do? And why would they? Since Yashoda Devi has always been a role model for practitioners, how could she have become Krishna's mother? By meditating on herself, by worshipping Krishna as her own son, sensible people will naturally accept that her position as Krishna's mother is eternal. For Mother Yashoda and for those devotees who attain a perfection like hers, Krishna is easily captured. But for others, even for the likes of Brahma, Shiva and Lakshmi, it is nearly impossible. I belong to the Vrajavasis and to no one else. They are my own people. Brahma and Shiva have certainly been recipients of my mercy, but because, like Lakshmi, they identify with their standing in the universal hierarchy, they still have a certain sense of being like me, a controller. Therefore, I submit to them only partly. There is another reason why the universal administrators cannot follow in the footsteps of Mother Yashoda. It is difficult, even painful for them to think of treating Krishna as an inferior, and that reluctance to conceive of Krishna as a subordinate will be shared by any devotee who does not hear about Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes and associates. But devotees who are free of all designations and who identify only with their spontaneous love for me, they will climb on my shoulders as do my friends, or chastise me as does my mother. In so doing, the Vrajavasis savor a transcendental happiness that is unknown to anyone else. And Mother Yashoda is the most fortunate of the Vrajavasis. Therefore, she relishes incomparable bliss in chasing after binding her son. Yes, no one compares to Mother. That is why I am called Gopika Sutta. While Krishna was absorbed in Vrajavasi Samadhi, the cowherd boy's frustration at his imprisonment surfaced in words critical of Mother Yashoda. My mother would never tie me down like this, nor mine. She loves me too much. We should protest to Nanda Maharaj. Let us make a delegation against such injustice. For a moment, Krishna rode the waves of his friend's critique and even shed a few tears to milk their sympathy. Poor Krishna, I will get a knife and cut this rope. Then the irrepressible love for his mother got the better of him, and rising to his feet like an orator, Krishna said, "Do not fault my mother." But his friends were not to be so easily silenced. We do not fault her, but how is it correct to treat a prince like a common criminal? Tell us. I will tell you. My mother's discipline is not due to a dearth, but rather to an abundance of affection for me. Because I am a prince, my conduct should be exemplary. And because she is a queen, she should discipline her son in the same way as she would any subject. The boys looked at each other, humbled, as Krishna continued, Because my mother loves you all so much as she loves me, she has decided to reprimand me publicly so that you accomplices in my crimes will also be forewarned. Looking at each boy in the eyes and then beyond them to Gokula and then beyond Gokula to the entire world, Krishna opened wide his arms and declared, "You should all know well that there is no greater love than that of Queen Yashoda. She is my greatest well-wisher and guide, and if she wanted to shackle me in a cold dungeon forever and ever, I would take that as a kindness upon me. Please never let me hear another unkind word from any of you about the Queen of Vraja." The boys were thunderstruck. Krishna radiated bliss and his eyes shed tears. Having concluded this proclamation of his mother's greatness, Gopika Sutta sat down and again entertained himself with his friends. The demigods too heard Krishna's proclamation and they bowed to him, their lord, in the form of a cowherd boy. Their own discourses as well as those of the birds and Krishna opened for them a new vista to transcendental realization. However, some of the devas had difficulty accepting the proposition that regulated devotion could not bring a worshipper to the same intimate service as could the spontaneous service exemplified by Queen Yashoda. In other words, they could not accept that regulated devotion was inferior to spontaneous devotion. And so they conversed, diving deep into the ocean of Vedic truths in order to distill a conclusion that was agreeable to them all. From what I have heard today, I must conclude that Lord Krishna fully reveals himself only to devotees who have spontaneous love for him, love that is unhampered by the slightest reverence for his divinity. That is also the message that I get, but my understanding has always been that careful adherence to scriptural injunctions, the path of Vaidhi Bhakti, is the means to attain the ultimate goal of life. An elder Deva replied, "My sons, your understandings of devotional service has been incomplete." The two inquired, "Please explain our misunderstanding based upon the authority of scriptures." Then hear how Vedanta answers this question with the aphorism, "Upapannas tal laksha anartha palabadher lokavat." It is best because the attainment of the goal, the Lord, is of the same nature as is exemplified by what we find in the world. May we have an explanation to this difficult to understand decree? The path of spontaneous devotion leads to the ultimate goal because it invokes Lord Krishna's most innate characteristic, which is to instinctively love his devotee. The example has been given is that of a king who comes under the control of his devoted servant. But does not the Lord submit to all his devotees? He does, and that is one of his special qualities, which, as you know, does not in the least diminish his supreme independence. We have understood that, but there is a difference between Lord Krishna submitting to a devotee who reveres him and to one who loves him. What is that difference? When Krishna submits to a pure love which is inspired by who he is, the cowherd of Vraja, the special sweetness of his personality comes to the fore and subverts his godhood. Under this circumstance, Krishna submission is also spontaneous, and so it is especially wonderful, for it is not weakened by formalities. In other words, Krishna's love for and submission to devotees with spontaneous love is also spontaneous, and it reveals his unfettered personality. Oh, I see. The Lord's foremost quality is his sweetness, but this sweetness cannot be fully known to regulated devotees. It is the prerogative of devotees in spontaneous attachment. And when Krishna manifests his sweetness to those rare souls, their love and devotion for him increases and places him under further obligation to them. In this ever-rising spiral of loving exchange, Krishna fully gives himself to his servant, after which he still considers himself to be in their debt. The senior Deva paused before revealing the essence of his teachings. Lord Krishna's nature is like this. He appreciates the sweetness of his devotees because he is all sweetness himself. And as the aphorism says, Lokavat, this is the way of this world. You are great demigods, revered by men, but do your wives revere you? No, they love you, as do family members their patriarch. It is the same way for the people of this planet. Loving a family member is natural, therefore loving the Lord in the liberated state is similar to the love people display for family members in their conditioned state, spontaneous. The transition is both easy and natural. Just transfer love from family to Krishna. This is the most powerful sadhana. The other demigods were wonderstruck to hear this revelation, and their hearts melted with attachment to Krishna. They thought, how wonderful a person is the Lord whom we worship. The Deva continued, now behold the Queen of Vrindavan, whom we called a Gopika. Out of his kindness, the Lord has allowed us to witness the power of her love and his complete surrender to it. She is the epitome of the Vedanta aphorism. O learned one, please reveal to us that specific scriptural affirmation that eulogizes Queen Yashoda. Then please listen to, learn and meditate on the statement of the spotless Puran. By so doing, the prevailing truths of spontaneous devotion and its reigning monarch will become known to you. The son of Vyas, Sri Shuka, said, Nayam Sukhapo Bhagavan Dehi Nam Gopika Sutaha Jnani Nam Chatma Bhutanam Yatha Bhakti Matam Iha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, the son of Mother Yashoda, is accessible to devotees engaged in spontaneous loving service, but he is not as easily accessible to mental speculators, to those striving for self-realization by severe austerities and penances, or to those who consider the body as the same as the self. Their misunderstanding about devotional service dispelled. The demigods were euphoric and repeated the verse of Srimad Bhagavatam over and over again. Nayam Sukhapo Bhagavan Dehi Nam Gopika Sutta Jnani Nam Chatma Bhutanam Yatha Bhakti Matam Iha. The two devas who had doubted the greatness of spontaneous devotion said, although Lord Krishna is controlled by all his devotees, he places himself fully under the control of devotees who are the embodiments of spontaneous love for him. Therefore, the path of spontaneous love is the best of devotional service, and the devotees who follow this path are the best of all devotees. Hearing the conclusion of his servants, Krishna was very pleased. He and his Vrindavan entourage had descended to earth to demonstrate the magic of spontaneous loving service. Now that conditioned souls like these demigods were appreciating that divine magic, he felt that his mission was becoming successful. He thought, may all others who hear and read the narrations of Srimad Bhagavatam also come to the same conclusion, and may they act according to that conclusion by always hearing and chanting about my Vrindavan pastimes. And this brings us to the end of chapter 8, Sri Damodar's Mother. And the chapters have become sweeter and sweeter as we progress through the book. And there are some notes at the end of this chapter. They are absolutely nectarian as well. I will read one or two. One of the notes says that in this regard, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Krishna Bhakti Janma Mula Haya Sadhu Sangha Krishna Prema Janme Tenho Punaha Muktya Anga. The root cause of devotional service to Lord Krishna is association with advanced devotees. Even when one's dormant love for Krishna awakens, association with devotees is still most essential. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Leela, chapter 22, verse 83. And this pastime is also described in chapter 13 of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And I will conclude my reading here, and we will continue with our reading next time from chapter 9, Krishna remembers Kuvera's sons. And tomorrow is also Diwali, so it is very auspicious that we have come to chapter 9 on the Diwali day, which is tomorrow. So thank you for joining, and we'll continue tomorrow. I don't know who has been with me during this reading. I haven't got the name, but I can see there's a person there. Hare Krishna to you, and we'll continue tomorrow. Hari Om Tat Sat. Have a lovely day. Hare Krishna.